Welcome to the High Quality Fun podcast where tough times make good stories. In today's episode, we talk with Chapin, who tells us about his 3 motorcycle trips through different parts of Central America. Each trip involved a new group of friends, a new country, and new mishaps. Chapin is the one who inspired us to do a similar trip through Costa Rica that I still consider one of our most adventurous trips to date. And it was great comparing his experiences to ours. With each and every trip, Chapin and his friends found themselves winging it by only booking the motorcycles and their plane tickets ahead of time. This unscheduled trip forced them to be fully immersed in the culture and lean on the locals in ways they never expected. This story is full of mishaps that you don't want to miss on this episode of the High Quality Fun podcast.
Thanks for having me on. Hopefully this blows your podcast up like you're hoping.
Yeah, we're just hoping that this blows up as much as your ego. So
yeah.
If you wanna go on for a little bit and tell the listeners about yourself, feel free.
Sure. As you said, I graduated from University of Illinois with a mechanical engineering degree, and then went to work for Ford in the Detroit area. That's where I met Tyler and a bunch of good friends. Ended up being there for 5 years. And then I moved to Santa Monica, Venice Beach area in Southern California. And then I nomaded for a year. And then I've kind of resettled in Denver now for the last coming up on a year. But in the 5 years that I was living in the Detroit area is when I did my 3 Central America trips on motorcycles with different people each time. And it started out of the blue, and then I decided to go back. And someday I'll do it again for sure. But they were, incredible, and definitely fell in love with Central America and Latin America. And then luckily able to inspire other people like you and Chelsea. So you're welcome for that.
You're welcome for that. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Even though you guys went, yeah, you're very welcome. I'm so glad to help. Although you guys went to the easiest country, so you kind of copped out there, but that's fine.
Yeah, for people who don't know, we decided to skip out on Christmas one year, and we flew down to Costa Rica and went around there. And I think it was intentional that we went to the easiest country because we wanted to get our feet wet and try it out, and had to relearn to ride a bike down there on the most dangerous road in the country. It was wild, and still my favorite trip of all time. So
were you guys tandem on your bike, or each had a bike?
We each had a bike. Yep.
Oh, sick. That's a good idea.
Yeah, that's great. What gave you the idea to do this, and where did you go first?
Yeah. So I joke about inspiring you. I mean, I was inspired by a friend who got the idea from his good buddy. So I'm joking. It's not I didn't come up with the idea. Not that anybody probably believed that. So I started working for Ford in 2014 over the summer. And by early the next year, I was already getting burnt out. I came into the department when we were launching a vehicle. And so there was a few months there that were just super busy, kind of over winter from December to February or so. And so out of the blue, my buddy from high school called me, and he was like, "Hey, I've got a trip that you should come on, and you can't say no." I'm like, "All right, well, maybe tell me what it is." And he's like, "We're going to Guatemala. We're going this weekend. We're going to rent motorcycles and ride around the country." And I was like, "All right, well, first of all, fuck yeah, actually. I had this kind of idea of riding, God, I think even going back to when I was a kid, and my mom and I would take trips every few years. We'd kind of do a big trip, just her and I. And one of the times we thought about doing 4-wheeling in Australia or something, crazy. So I'd always been interested in doing kind of overlanding and on a small motorized vehicle and covering a lot of ground. But so he called me on a Tuesday, I think in March or something. And he's like, we're going this weekend. And I'm like, okay, well, I can't go this weekend, but maybe the weekend after. They're like, tell me more. And so his he was in between jobs, and so he only had like a few weeks, you know, before he needed to start his next job. And uh, his buddy and his buddy's brother or something, they had just done this trip where they, you know, flew into Guatemala, rented bikes out of Antigua, Guatemala, and then rode this big itinerary. And so he was like, we should just do the same thing. We already kind of know some of the places to stay and like where to you know, reputable place to rent bikes from. And so I'm like, all right, I'm super intrigued by that. And I was like, let me talk to work. So skipping a bunch of detail or useless
Bureaucracy.
details. I talked to work about it. They were like, maybe, and then they were like, no, and I was like, oh, sorry, I'm going anyways. I already booked tickets, and they weren't really like no. They were more like, please don't do that right now. But it ended up being related to the work thing. Like it was great for me to kind of get out of my own ass and this idea that I was so necessary for these ginormous programs at a huge company that have thousands and thousands of people working on. So like it was good after the trip was done to come back and be like, okay, the machine is still running. And so I'm really glad I kind of pushed through and committed. And so yeah, I think like 10 days after my buddy called me, we were in Guatemala, and he called me. He hit me up because he knew I rode bikes. I had learned to ride a road bike, my mom's Suzuki Intruder, actually. And my mom's 5'2", and so this thing is like, the frame's small, it's low to the ground. Like I looked like an ape on this thing, but I learned like when I was back from college in California for the summers, I got my permit and I got my license and kind of learned there. And then in college, I bought a Ducati 900 Super Sport. It was a 1995 model. So like 85 horsepower or something, not like crazy, as crazy as the Japanese bikes today, but it was fun. And got it from my buddy's dad for a good deal. And it was great. So I had ridden that for a while. And so he knew that I rode. And so he was like, you know, I would have some experience. So we spent a little bit of time like planning the itinerary. He kind of knew some spots to go to because of his buddy that had gone, and we planned a rough itinerary. I had kind of an idea of like how much ground we should try to cover, although it was, at least on that first trip, what I thought we should try to cover was like way more than what I kind of got less and less, I think, on each trip, because you just get more realistic about how long it takes to get around and traffic and actual travel speed and how many stops you make and things like that. And then I'm pretty sure I brought some really basic tools, thinking like if we needed to change a tire or like, I don't know, adjust the carbs or something. And I think I maybe checked my bag. So I was trying to remember like how I even got some basic tools through the airport, but I think I maybe checked them. And yeah, so then we ended up in Antigua, Guatemala, and that was the start of the first trip.
And I assume it just went so great. It was so much fun that you decided to do it again. What other countries did you end up hitting after that?
Yeah, so this was 2015, I think. Yeah, it was 2015 that my buddy Nick and I did Guatemala, and then in 2016 over the Thanksgiving break, me and 3 other different guys went to Costa Rica and did the same thing. Flew in, rented bikes, rode around. And then in 2018, back in the like springtime in April, I went with a different set of 2 guys. And there was kind of an interesting progression because the second time I went, I was like, whoever wants to go, this is super easy, relatively easy. It's an adventure. I don't know. In my head, I was thinking this is so easy. I think because my buddy that went with me on the first trip to Guatemala had never even ridden a motorcycle or he didn't know how to drive a manual car. And, motorcycle manual gearbox is like, it's not that hard. It's really not that hard. But at least if you've driven a manual car, you have some idea of like what a clutch does and like going through gears. He had none of that and like did great on this Guatemala trip. And so the second trip, I kind of just like opened up like whoever wants to go. and one guy ended up backing out like real late and like just decided to get a rental car. And I was like, well, that's not exactly what this trip is about, but okay. And it was like a great time. But they weren't maybe like on the same wavelength of like what this adventure is going to be. So by the third one, I like hand selected some invites, and the two guys that went, it was awesome. Nicaragua was in 2018 was crazy. So yeah, Guatemala in 2015, Costa Rica in 2016, and then Nicaragua in 2018.
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to take this wherever you want to go. Like, I don't know if we want to dive into each particular country, or maybe you can give us the highlights of each one.
Yeah, let's we can go through the individual countries because the progression was interesting. I'll cover a couple things in Guatemala and then probably leave it short, and I'll think of maybe I think about the funny things that come up. I can come back to it, but the like cool, the really cool parts of the Guatemala trip was like it was so spontaneous for me, and like I'm a planner. Like I actually like I'm a product manager now, but like I've been saying I'm a planner by profession for like a number of years now. So like I plan ahead, and for my buddy to call me and do this like international trip was a little out of character for me at the time. And so that was just so cool to jump into that. Him and I both spoke some Spanish from like high school, and we're both white, like very white. But that was like a ton of fun to kind of practice Spanish again. And he had like him and I both had enough together that we kind of supported each other on that trip. And so like that kind of just started us off like on a good foot. And him not having ridden a bike before, and like my friend Nick, the guy that we went to Guatemala the first trip, he like we used to riff on him for I don't know, it's hard to explain, but like definitely not always like you wouldn't call him big bald. Like he definitely was not a person to like nut up, if I can use an outdated gendered idiom. But and so that was really cool that like we got in on I think a Saturday, rented the bikes Sunday morning, and then I spent like 2 hours with him on the bike, just going up and down these brick roads in this city that we kind of started in. And then while we were at the bike shop on that Sunday, we ran into a guy who was maybe a couple years older than us, like 1 to 2. He had like graduated med school in Ireland. He was Irish, and he like didn't, I don't remember the exact circumstances, but he wasn't ready to like keep continuing through the doctor path and start working immediately. And so he just was like fucking off for a while. And he was riding around several countries in Central America, and happened to be, in Guatemala. And so when we were at the shop renting the bikes and we're talking about where we wanted to go, which the main destination was Samuk Chempei, which was way north, and it was like where it's kind of in these lush lowlands, and there was a lot of water, and like water would collect in these rivers and stuff in these valleys, and it's really pretty. And when he kind of overheard us talking with the shop guy, the guy renting the bikes to us, he's like, I haven't been up there, I've been trying to go, like, can I tag along with you guys? And we were like looking at his bike, which was like 3 times the size of the bike we were renting, right? Like, absolutely, like, you're gonna lead, and so this was Sunday. My buddy, he taught him how to row through the gears and get around on the motorcycle for 2 hours, and then we're like, let's go up to this church on the top of a hill, like in the city that we were at, just as like a warm-up, and then we'll leave tomorrow morning. And so like, within 2 hours, my buddy's riding a bike up this dirt road. It was real steep. It started raining, and like, he's doing fine. So I'm like, all right, this is going to work. Like, I was like, I was fine. I was like fearless enough on a bike to maybe like not even know about or think about the dangers and stuff. So like, I was going to be fine, but I was a little worried about him going in.
Did you have to communicate to the shop guy that he had no idea how to ride, or did you just kind of brush that under his nose?
You know, that's a really good question because in the other two trips, we all had to have at least a permit to ride in
Yep.
our home country. And I had a full, license anyways, so it was on my driver's license, and you just had to have it in your home country. But like, I guess in Guatemala, it either wasn't a big deal, or my buddy did take the written test to get his permit in California. Maybe I can't remember. I can't remember now, but
Well,
somehow,
so you put it in our brain like you need to have the written test, and we're like, all right, cool, got it. We grew
yeah,
up riding dirt bikes and everything, but we hadn't rode them in 5-10 years, and so we show this permit, and the guy lets us ride it up and down the street, and we're just like, okay, yep, you're ready. All right, this guy will guide you out of the city. And so we hopped on our bikes and followed him, and later found out it was literally the most dangerous road in the whole country, and it was raining. So like we're literally learning to ride in chaos, and thank God nothing went wrong. But yeah, the fact that you were able to teach him, I think that's much safer than what we had to do.
yeah, yeah. Antigua, Guatemala is like a really cool little town outside of Guatemala City, and I think it's really popular for travelers to post up there, because like what we had heard was like, don't do anything in the big cities, and so like we kind of just followed that, and so got out to the outskirts or various other cities in the countryside and stuff as soon as possible. But so yeah, we had a good starting point to to kind of mess around and take a little practice trip up to the church, up this hill. But like, even that, I was like, all right, you're gonna have to change gears on a pretty steep hill, and he's been riding for 2 hours at this point, and I was just teaching him, like, don't be afraid to kind of hold the RPMs up, because you're going to need a lot of RPMs to, if you're starting on an incline like that, to get going from a stop. And like, and he did fine. I think it helps that the bikes we were on in Guatemala were, oh man, I'm not going to remember what the bikes were, but I think they were only like 150s or something.
Okay. Yeah.
Like 154 strokes, because yeah, so not that big. Maybe it was a 250. Maybe it was 250. But I remember in Costa Rica and Nicaragua, the bikes were bigger than what we got in Guatemala. But so
you got everyone pretty much set up, and do you just like beeline it straight for your end destination?
So yeah, and like, so we knew we were going to get started Monday morning, and we had to be back in Antigua, Guatemala by Friday. So we only had 5 days of riding.
Yep.
And we knew we wanted to take like 2 overnights in Samuk Chapin, where we were going to stay in this treehouse hostel. And so we're like, we're definitely going to do 2 nights. That'll give us 1 full day of rest. But so everything else, like, so I think the original, plan was like, get up there Monday and have Tuesday, Wednesday night up there, get back Thursday to back down to the southern area, and then go to Lake Atitlan Thursday and stay there Thursday night, and then come back Friday to Antigua, and then fly back out the next Saturday. But Monday morning we get going, and somewhere halfway through the day, I get a flat tire, and we're on a paved highway at this point. And so I'm thinking like, all right, well, at least I didn't like blow a tire and, fall off the bike or something. It was just like something was wrong. I looked down, it's flopping around. I'm like, shit, okay, flat tire. And then my next thought is like, where the fuck are we going to get this taken care of? And, they were up ahead of me a little bit because I'd slowed down on the highway, and so they had like gained some distance. And then somebody kind of came back on the shoulder like for me, and they were like, I think there's a tire place like up the way. And I don't know if I learned this that day or if kind of before, whatever, but there's a universal symbol down there for like a tire shop, and it's like a stack of tires with one tire as it would roll on the ground or whatever, standing up, and it might say like pinchasa, I think is the phrase for pinchasa or llantas, like las llantas or something like that. I think maybe pinchasa is like the name of a tire shop or like means tire shop, but then las llantas is like llanteria is like a tire, something related to tires. So clearly my Spanish hasn't gotten that good for these trips, but like enough that I could recognize like a symbol and be like, all right, they might be able to help. So sure enough, like a half a mile ahead. And so I just like slowly rode the bike up to this tire shop. And like it was like a semi truck tire place. And so I'm thinking like there's no way they're gonna have like tubes for this, this enduro bike. Like sure enough, they had a tube, and kind of took a while to like get the wheel off, get it switched. But I'm thinking like at least these guys are helping. Like this would take us hours probably, right? Even if we had a tube, they get it on and then go to fill it up, and it's just like won't fill up or it deflates immediately or something. And we'd like pinch the tube or something, putting it in. And so I remember trying to ask them in Spanish, like, whose fault is it? I was like, ¿Quién es la falta? Which I don't think is, I think la culpa or something is I wasn't even saying the right word. They're like, I don't know, dude. And then I was like, whatever. It was like a $7 tube, and like I think they were charging us like $7 or $10, to change it. So it was like wasn't a prohibitive amount of money. I'm like, okay, this doesn't matter. Like these guys are saving our asses on day one, So like, all right, let's buy it. So like they had another tube, so they took the wheel off. This time it was a lot faster, and then we got going. But that ate up, a good chunk of the afternoon, like 2.5 hours maybe. And so there was like no way we were going to make it all the way to Chapin that first day. So we rode to like dusk, and then we're like, we'll stop it. We had a paper map, and we're like, we'll stop at a big city. And so we stayed overnight in Santa Cruz de Quiche. And it was, I guess it wasn't really that big of a city, but like a small town. And we rolled up on a hotel or hostel or something, and kind of walked in and checked it out and talked to the person. And we were like, yep, cool, we'll stay here. And it's great. And that was my like preferred method of lodging, was to kind of have an idea of like what city am I going to, and are there what hostels there would I want to go to. But because these things happen and the itinerary is hard to keep up, you got to just be ready to like roll up on a hotel or hostel, and that was like so much of the fun, and like so much of what I would like want to do again. Like there's no way I would do a fourth trip and try to plan every night and like where to stay. It's just so much fun to like see what city you end up in. And
at that point you've done 3 of the Central America countries, so you kind of know what to expect. I feel like when we did it, it was a full day of driving every time, and then a full day of lounge, relaxing, doing stuff. We changed on that a little bit, but yeah, if we had a flat tire on any of our days, I think that would have had us like driving in at night or something. Let's take a quick break and hear from our sponsors. Here on the High Quality Fun podcast, we love showcasing people's stories through our interviews and posts. This gives our guests the opportunity to share their favorite memories, but sometimes audio alone is not enough. Most people are sitting on a collection of hundreds of photos and videos capturing their favorite moments without the time or experience needed to compile these memories into a video. This is why I have chosen to partner with Spivo. Simply send them your unsorted photos and videos, and in 7 days or less, they will create a professional video edit that allows you to relive your favorite memories again and again. To ensure every customer is satisfied with their video edit, Spivo provides unlimited revisions for 30 days and offers a 100% money-back satisfaction guarantee. As someone who has limited time to edit his family adventures, let alone this podcast, I am excited to work with Spivo to help everyone eternalize their favorite moments. Visit spivo.com/discount/highqualityfun to learn more and let us know what you think about the product. We'd love to share it. Now, back to the show. You get there, tear up the city. Did you end up staying there, or did you spend the next day to get to the destination you intended?
Yeah. So we stayed overnight in Santa Cruz de Quiche. And at this point, we rode through like countryside, I would call it. And then we stayed overnight. And then the next day, it was like, okay, we're going to get to Chapin so fast. It's going to be Easy. And I think we were like maybe talking to some locals and they were asking where we were going, or we were asking like confirming directions or something. And I think we were using a paper map. I don't know that I had like kind of GPS or like offline maps, right? I don't think I had even thought of that, or I didn't even know if that Google Maps was doing that at this point. So we're using paper maps, and I think we had gotten some people telling us like Smoke Champagne is, like you're not gonna make, like it's so far, And you also have to keep in mind that like the travel around there, tourists will often take chicken buses, which are, I'm pretty sure, like US buses that were sold or relegated to like Mexico and South America or something. And then they're like all painted cool colors and like have all this flashing stuff. And then they'll cram like 80 people on it, but it's a super cheap way to get around, but they're slow. And then also, it also seemed like kind of time is just slower down there, So if we were trying to pull off 200 kilometers or something in a day, like people just didn't think we would do that. But that was an advantage of like having our own bikes, is like we were on our time. We weren't waiting for the chicken buses, and we didn't have to wait in traffic. And then on day 2, we had to scale to like, I don't remember, oh man, I have a picture somewhere, I think, with the altitude, but I mean, I think we were scaling to like 6,000 or 7,000 foot mountain passes. And I think we had maybe identified like, okay, this route is shorter, but it will be like rougher, but we were like, we're going to do it. But so pretty, at some point during the second day, we're just going through like range and range after range of mountains, and in these like really tall mountain passes, really rough, dirt roads. But we were able to pass kind of everybody else that had to take it like really slow. And we had this guy, I don't know if I mentioned that or connect that the dots, like this Irish dude on his really big bike who had been riding around these countries for a number of weeks before, we even met him. He was kind of taking the lead. And so we were able to just like crush through what would have otherwise been like, very apprehensive terrain and route if it would have been just my buddy Nick and I would have been more worried about him because like of just going on these routes. But I think because there's 3 of us and we both were able to kind of follow this guy, like it calmed everybody's nerves. And the mountains up there was like really dry and arid but beautiful. Really interesting thing to see was just trash, how much trash was just off the sides of the roads and just burning, just slightly smoldering. And that was just like a common way to deal with trash there, which is like a little sad, but it's a different way of life, and so it's not really you don't really judge it. It's just interesting to see. So long, it ended up being a long full day of riding on Tuesday, and I think we got on our bikes at 7:30 a.m. or something. Like we weren't wasting time, and we still didn't get to Smoke Champagne until dark. When it was dusk, we started coming down from the arid dry mountains, and it got like lusher and greener, and it was kind of dusk. We pulled over to take a picture of this like beautiful valley. I ended up the picture that I took with my camera phone at the time was good enough that I ended up blowing it up and have it like custom framed. And it's this like huge printout now that I have now. And it's like this beautiful picture, but we stopped to take that picture and we're like, all right, I think we're almost there. And then it was like another like hour and a half and 45 minutes going. And now we're in the jungle, like jungle-ish, kind of feel. And we're going on these really crappy roads, just really like up and down, going by our headlights. Ton of fun. I'm still thinking like, all right, is Nick like, shitting his pants or is he okay? But he's like keeping up the highs. Like, all right, let's keep going. And then we finally pull up to this treehouse hostel and we park our bikes and get off. And they're kind of looking at us like, like these guys are showing up at like 7:30 p.m., which is an hour and a half or whatever, 2 hours into after sunset, because sunset's so kind of consistently around like 5:30 down there close to the equator. And so they kind of look at us like everyone's like almost ready to go to sleep. We're rolled up like it's like, oh my god, we need food. Like we spent 2 days riding. Now this is the first real destination. And then I think it was like a vegan and vegetarian place. So the food was not exactly satisfying in the way that meat eaters might want, but like it was great to get there. And then we just chilled for a little bit and like crashed early, and then woke up, and this treehouse hostel was like, it's basically just this open air thing with multiple levels and trees growing all through it. And I think it was kind of mostly like a big A-frame that had open kind of front and back. And so we woke up in like bunk beds in the morning and just like looking out into this like lush valley with this river, big river going by that you could hear. And then spent a day around there. And went to these like beautiful water pools that were a really cool like turquoise color. And then that was Thursday. That was Thursday? No, I'm sorry. That was Wednesday. And then Thursday, we wanted to get back to Antigua, Guatemala Thursday, like for sure, because we still wanted to go to Lake Atitlan on Friday and do like a day trip, like out there and then back and then fly out Saturday. And so we hoofed it Thursday and made it back to Antigua. One of the coolest parts that day was we took a different route to go back, and it was like straighter and better roads and more paved. And I think because we like opted for the highways, we're able to make up the time to do it in one day, as opposed to like dirt roads and going through the mountains. But there was a portion where we were doing these kind of twisty paved, really nice paved highway roads, and it reminded me so much of like Northern California where I grew up. There was like carnivorous trees. Yeah, carnivorous trees, like pine needle, trees, and all along this elevation and these like twisty roads. And it was just so odd that I wasn't expecting like a Central American country to have like such various terrains, like these low lush lands that felt kind of like forest or like rainforest, and then these arid, dry mountain passes that we were going through, and then these like temperate pine, carnivorous forests. But that was just like incredible. It was a really, really good day of riding, even though we were like getting really beat. And then, and then we ate some like fresh pico and had margaritas, and something got me. And then I was just like shitting myself Friday. So we didn't go to Aussie's launch.
What an end to the trip. So you like missed out on that whole day trip, pretty much cleared that virus and then went home.
Yeah. We did go up to this somewhere outside of Antigua, Guatemala. It's called like Tierra del Mundo. So it comes to mind. But it was a really, really awesome lookout. And you could see the volcanoes that were near Antigua. I think there's two of them. And so we just went up to this lookout, and I just like sat and, cried and tried to recover. But it was like the most relaxing thing we could do while having travelers, fucking shitty stomach. And then we went back Saturday, and that was trip one. And so like looking back, we didn't hit very many destinations in terms of like where we spent nights, but we had just such sick days of riding. Like Guatemala is just unbelievable countryside and like so various depending on where you're at. And we'd stop in and get food at just these little places. One of the places we stopped and ate was like a person's home. And we were like, can we wash our hands? We're like, oh, sure. There's like a bathroom in the back where it's like walk through their kind of adobe kind of home. And they were making dinner meals like and selling them. And it was like a restaurant, but it was kind of like a little restaurant, like two tables in the front of their home. And then the rest of it was their home. But like just, people are just very, humble living and like really, really cool, super nice.
That's cool. That's really cool. You went, okay, so that was the first year. Just for sake of time, like let's like highlight the best parts of the next two trips, and talk about what was unique about those. So you went to Costa Rica second, and you were joking with me that this was the easiest country to go through. Who'd you go with, and what'd you do all there?
Yeah, so I went with a buddy from college, his dad is who I bought my Ducati from. And so he grew up riding some and whatever. He's the one that ended up renting a car, which his wedding is like this weekend. I'm gonna have to give him some shit for that. And then a buddy from work who had ridden some is definitely kind of an adventurous guy, and then he brought his buddy that he knew from the military. I think is how they knew each other. So it was us four guys, and we started planning months ahead. I thought, like, let's do it over Thanksgiving because we have a bunch of time off for a couple days, in that week already off. The thing about that is that's technically like in their shoulder season, I believe, which is where it goes from wet in the summer to starting to dry out, and then like it's like mid-December or something, late December, and then on as you get towards April and May, it'll get drier and drier and like pretty nice. And it's like after all the rain and stuff. But in end of November, your chance of rain, is going to be there. And that ended up being a thing for sure. We rode through some rain on that trip. Yeah, we rode through some rain. That's right. So we planned for a bit. We actually were going to go to Nicaragua for this trip. And for some reason, 2 months out, 2.5 months out, when we start like getting serious, like, all right, we know the dates, we want to buy our tickets. Nicaragua got like relatively expensive, $700 or something when we were hoping for like 300 or 400. And then, and it was just it was making the whole trip expensive. And like this whole thing was supposed to be like super cheap lodging. We rent motorcycles instead of spending money on buses and different things. And so that keeps it pretty cheap. And then cheap plane tickets was the goal. And so we like called an audible and just decided to go to Costa Rica instead because the tickets were cheaper for everybody, like 2.5 months out. And so we had already had some places to go in mind, and Nicaragua was just like, scrap it. We're going to Costa Rica instead. So yeah, we end up in Costa Rica. We rented bikes. The place we rented from in Costa Rica was actually in like, I think San Jose is where we flew into. I think there's 2 different main cities in Costa Rica that you can fly into, but we rented our bikes from like the main city, which was a little different from the other 2 trips. And my buddy, and like, I mean, I guess I must have been looking at the weather, but my buddy Chris, who got the car, is definitely a little more like attentive to the weather. And like he definitely could have been a meteorologist in a different way. And he was like, guys, there's a hurricane coming like into Costa Rica like this week. And I was like, whatever, it's probably fine. Probably not. And so he's like, no, it's a hurricane. And he lived in North Carolina this time. Like I grew up in California. I don't know what a fucking hurricane is, I'm like, all right, whatever, it's gonna be windy and rain. And so we start watching this. So now it's like, I think it was a similar deal. We were supposed to start Monday morning, and Monday morning we wake up. We had got our bikes all set up, I think the day before, Sunday. We wake up Monday morning, and now this hurricane has been graduated to some level that was concerning. And I'm like, but it was like supposed to hit Costa Rica like on Thursday or Friday. And so I'm thinking like, all right, well, that's a Wednesday night problem, to solve. Like this type of trip, you got to just go and figure stuff out. And I'm kind of thinking like, if we're going to get stuck here, I'd rather be on the trip, somewhere out in the country, holed up at a hostel. And if we're going to be stuck, we're going to be stuck, right? If we have to fly back late, like whatever. So let's just like get on the road. And that group was not thinking the same thing. They were probably being smarter and more cautious. And so we kind of had to rearrange our itinerary. And so what we did was we went to a more nearby destination in Costa Rica, nearby to the city, on like the first day. So that by the second day, we could kind of be like, nope, okay, we're going back to the big city, as opposed to getting kind of like really far away, and then the hurricane hits and we're stuck out there or whatever. So the first day we went up to a cloud forest, and like it was beautiful. We like got up there the first day. Next morning, hiked around. It was absolutely beautiful. Yeah, I remember we had like amazing pictures of the sunset that Monday night when we got in. crazy. And then we're kind of watching the storm, and it's like still off Thursday, Friday, whatever. And I think maybe it was starting to like ease up even on like day 2 on that Tuesday. So then we're like, all right, let's go to the next spot, which was a volcano, Monteverde.
Yep.
And yeah, all right. So the
Yeah.
first one was do you know what was the first location I'm thinking of? Cloud Forest.
Arnold. Arnold, is it?
Oh, yes, I'm mixing them up though. Monteverde was the cloud forest,
Yep.
and Arenal was the volcano. Beautiful volcano. Costa Rica also just incredibly beautiful countryside, and the riding out there is amazing.
The one thing I remember about Monteverde, it was very pretty, but I got shit on by a monkey that was totally intentional. We're like, oh look, monkeys walking along, and this thing positioned himself right above me and pissed, and I'm like, oh god. And as I'm trying to scurry away, I feel like something like tap me, and sure enough, there's just like little shit spots on the back of my neck. Very funny. Could have been way worse, but yeah, that's what I think of when I think of the cloud forest.
Did you do a guided tour through the cloud forest?
No, we didn't. It was strange because, like, you know, national parks out here, you pay like $10 to drive through, $5, whatever, it's free. And then out there, it's like $30 or something every time you want to enter in a park or something. And so it was just like very interesting.
Or you got ripped off by people that just say it's $30 at the entrance for gringos.
There was one waterfall we saw that I wasn't too sure about, but that one, Monteverde, was definitely legit. Like, they had booths and everything and like whatever. But yeah, no, we did not do a guided tour. We just kind of wandered and did a day hike. That was great.
Yeah. Well, I asked because we didn't see like hardly any animals in that cloud forest, which we were really surprised about. And I think what makes a cloud forest is like a rainforest that's above 3,000 feet, 3,500 feet or something. And so like we were literally like in the clouds. And so like clouds be kind of passing through it. So it was kind of foggy, you know, whatever. So I mean, that's probably partly why we didn't see animals, but it was kind of crazy that like, and like I'm sure they're there and they're just like not presenting themselves. But that was interesting. But one of the things that would have been cool is like there was advertisements for guided night hikes through there.
We did,
and they help you find like nocturnal animals, which just sounded really cool.
We did one of those not in Monteverde. It was just in a different area of the country. I'm blanking on the names, but it was really cool. Like, we got to see tarantulas, a viper, which is like one of the most poisonous snakes in the world. Chelsea found a possum, so that was funny. What's that over there? Everyone's all excited. Yeah. Yes, we found the North American
exotic North American possum. Yeah.
Good job. We did not see any sloths. That was a big bummer. When we did zip lining, we saw like toucans and some other stuff. So we got to see quite a bit. No sloth, but the night hike was very cool. It was creepy as hell seeing those gnarly tarantulas.
Yeah. I don't think we saw any big insects, thankfully. I mean, that'd be cool seeing it on like a guided hike, but yeah. So
did the hurricane pass through? Because that was about that time then, right?
Yeah, right. So now we're in like Wednesday or something. I think Wednesday, and we had gotten to the volcano. We had gotten to the cloud forest. There was only like one other destination to go, which was the beach, and then stay there for 2 nights, which is like nice because I mean, that's like, you know, 3 really full days of riding, like 12-hour days of riding and like a lot of stops because you kind of just have to. These little enduro bikes, they will only go, I think they only go 60 miles on a tank or something, you know? And so it's like, it's not, I mean, also we're doing this all in kilometers, but I think I figured we actually averaged with stops like 24 kilometers an hour or something. Like it's surprisingly slow, but it's also just fun because it doesn't feel slow at all. Like, you know, you're just trucking. But so yeah, we made it down to the beach. I can't even remember.
Was it Hako?
Exactly Hako.
Yeah. I think we copied that from you too.
Yeah. And that's like a party town. Yeah, that's right. One of the guys, we just had to go to the fucking brothel down there and like just pissed a bunch of nice whores off because nobody paid them for anything. We like bought a couple of drinks and they're like, dude, you can't just come in and hang out for an hour and leave. It's like, sorry, that's what we're gonna do. That's what we're doing. We're out of here. We got some funny pictures and videos and stuff though, I think. Uh and then and we rode through some rain during that later part of the week, which was a little sketchy. I went down earlier in the week on probably day 2. Uh yeah. It was a dirt road. We're going downhill. I grabbed too much front brake with the wheel, kind of turned and just like the bike slid out and I went over the handlebars. Was fine. Bruised my ego worse than anything. Maybe bruised my shoulder a little bit. But my buddy in the car kind of came around the corner and like sees me down and tries to stop fast. And I think like overreacted a bit and just like started sliding. And he slides like off the dirt road a little bit, not like flying off, but like enough that, and he wasn't a great manual driver, so somebody else had to get in and like reverse the car back onto the road and go through. And while we're figuring this shit out, and I'm just like feeling like a dum dum for going down and whatever, and they're backing the car out. This like little girl on like a Vespa, it just like right around us on this really slick like dirt road, and like clearly knew way better than us how to navigate that. And was like clearly a way better rider, and just right around, just like bobbing us like bowling pins. And I was like, okay, cool, thanks a lot. So we did Hako, and then that was pretty much that trip. What was interesting is the hurricane ended up not hitting Costa Rica that badly. And I think back to like that morning when I was trying to like inspire these people to like not be afraid and like, but we don't know what this is going to turn into. And I think about like I could have handled that better. I got kind of like frustrated because I thought like, oh, I'll just like tough love, like come on, like no, we're here for this thing, and like that didn't really work. So that was kind of interesting, and like a lesson. But what we saw in the news at the end of the week was that it like fucked up Nicaragua. Certain areas in Nicaragua, got like mudslides took out villages and stuff and like smaller cities, which is like potentially where we'd be staying because a lot of the spots overnight are like small towns. And Costa Rica is built up a little more than Guatemala and Nicaragua. I mean, probably a significant amount more actually. And so that's why I kind of say that Nicaragua is a little bit easier. There's a lot more English spoken. It seems like things are a little bit more expensive because it's a little more trafficked and a little more built up. But yeah, so if we would have stuck to the original plan in Nicaragua, we would have had a problem. And I don't know that I could have like successfully led a group of people, out of that because I was younger, at the time, and like I'm hell bent on like we're here to do this adventure, like fuck it.
Yeah.
So that was interesting, but worked out fine. Another great trip.
That's
and
wild.
then I had this itinerary left over from Nicaragua that we didn't do. So I was like, all right, well, the next one I'm going to Nicaragua for sure. And so then like, a couple years later, I already had destinations picked out and then was a little more selective about who I gave an invite to. And the two guys that went that I invited had a decent amount of riding experience. Because for that third trip, I was like, we're going to go far and ride hard. And so I want people that are like ready for that.
Yeah. Anything notable in that trip, or pretty smooth sailing?
Overall, it was probably my favorite. And I think a lot of it has to do because I was so comfortable by that time. It was just like, it's like, I got a passport. I have this Google Doc of itinerary. I know that I don't need to book anything other than bikes ahead of time because I'm just going to stay wherever we happen to be, that night, like on the road. And so it was just so easy and comfortable. And Nicaragua was an incredible country. And we covered so much ground. We did 1,000 kilometers on that trip. And so like, I was really proud of how far, we got on that one. The guys were dope because they had the experience to get through some of the shit that we went through. And so overall it was like fantastic. But the one of the really cool parts, like midweek, we ferried the motorcycles to this island made up of 2 volcanoes called Ometepe. So we ferried the bikes over there, and they had a road that went like around, or roads, a main one that went around the 2 volcanoes on the perimeter. But we were able to ride around and then get into this park, this like waterfall up at the top of this hike, and we were able to like ride up a dirt road like halfway and then hike the rest of the way to this waterfall. But so we're like on, and these islands, sorry, they're inside of a lake. They're inside this giant lake inside Nicaragua. And so we like, ferried the bikes over, riding around an island, riding halfway up a volcano, and then hiking to this waterfall, up a little past there too. And like just incredible, like really, really cool, adventurous like stuff out there. And then my buddy Leo, on the ferry ride back across to the mainland, we were going to get to the beach town by that night. I think this was Wednesday night or something. And so it's similar to the other trips, like you get to the beach town and then spend 2 nights there, so you have a full day to rest. And so after the ferry drops you off on the mainland, back to the mainland, it was only like a 45-minute drive to the beach town. And my buddy Leo is being like, I'm getting a little nauseous, on this ferry. I'm like, maybe it's the waves. It was a little windy or something. Maybe it's the water. And then we get on mainland, and he's like, I really don't like feel good. Let's go to a drugstore. I'll just get some like Tums or something. And he got some Tums or something, and it's just getting worse. And I thought he was being kind of dramatic at first or something, a little bit, but then like fast forward, he's doubled over on a public sidewalk on this little street, like across the street from this little pharmacy kind of drugstore, where he had bought some stuff, and is just like puking and like retching and doubled over. I'm like, his appendix blew or something. Like he's got internal bleeding. Like this is not just travelers, fucking shitty stomach. Like he's got like the worst, cramps or I don't know, something going on. And all I can think of is his appendix, because like what else would come on that fast and that hard? And so the people that ran the drugstore lived next to it. They lived right next to it. And they were like, we'll take you to a hospital. Like we can go there. And so they threw Leo in the back of their pickup truck, and we're like, well, what do we do with this bike? Like we don't have big like bike chain locks or something. You can't just leave a motorcycle out in the city, especially like it was getting into the evening. It was like end of the day. And it's like, you can't just leave it. And they're like, put it in our courtyard. We can lock it in our house. And we're like, all right, okay. And so but they're like, but hurry, we got to go. And so we throw his bike in their yard. My other buddy, Pascal, he's a French Canadian guy that I know from interning at Tesla years ago. He's an awesome guy. Him and I are just like, all right, we'll follow. And so we're trying to keep up with this little pickup truck. And Leo now at this point is kind of like smiling, like laughing in the back of this pickup truck. And we're trying to keep up because like, we don't know where the fuck this hospital is. Like if we lost that truck, we'd never find him. And he's kind of laughing. And it's like, Leo, like you dumb shit. Like I'm supposed to be at the beach right now, and instead we're taking your broken ass to some hospital. We go to a elementary school that had like a free clinic in it. This was not a hospital. They had rooms set up with some medical equipment and like IVs and whatever. And we wait around. He finally gets into a room, and it's like a dilapidated elementary school that is just running this free clinic. And so they give him an IV. And at first he was telling us, once we got into the room with him, he was telling us they tried to just like put the needle in, and he's like, soap or like alcohol or something. And they're like, no, it's okay. He's like, no, I'm really dirty. Like I've been riding, motorcycles for like days. And they're like, oh, okay. And then finally get some alcohol to swab. Like they weren't even going to swab his arms. Like, woo, little, yeah. Quick and dirty. but it was free, I guess. And so they gave an IV and maybe some like anti-nausea, something. And then he got feeling better. Definitely wasn't like dying. And it ended up, it was not his appendix. He just had like the worst reaction, like food poisoning, like most violent, fast reaction, the worst cramps I've like ever seen. And so we ended up getting in this kind of little port city that we were in, got a hostel overnight because he couldn't ride the next, we couldn't, it was late. It was dark now at this point. Like we weren't going to ride the last 45 minutes, hour to the beach town. And I'm just like, all right, thanks a lot, Leo. I could be like, you could be dying in our hostel at the beach while we're at the beach. But instead, we got to be here with you dying and like recovering. And it ended up being chill and it's just part of how it goes. And this hostel we stayed at was like, it wasn't even really a hostel. It was like somebody's home with like little tiny rooms in the back. And like, it's just cool. It was just cool shit. I think Leo's is Colombian. So he spoke the best Spanish on that trip. And so he had talked to somebody that, I don't know, that we had, something another like $8 a night stay. It's easy.
I remember briefly hearing about that story with Leo, but I couldn't remember if that was down in like South America or Central America. So that's like great to hear the full story of it.
And because Leo worked at Fort with us too.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and I skipped a little bit. All of this happened after a like flash rain had happened a day or two before. And like it just rained like hard for a second and that was done, but it just made the roads really slick. And Leo and I both went down on like asphalt. And I went down, I was like pissed, but I didn't get hurt. It was fine. And I don't even think anything happened. And Leo like twisted his ankle, like broke the maybe the clutch lever off of his bike. We happened to be like steps away from a motorcycle parts store that had a lever that we replaced, just like incredibly lucky. But he was shook up from that because I don't think he had been down on a bike before. And I've been down on a bike enough times that I don't ride on the street anymore because I'm tired of doing that. Apparently I can't ride a fucking motorcycle on the street. So I don't know, kind of could take it a little better. But that was a couple days ago. Shook him up, twisted his ankle. And then he gets just the worst cramps, like stomach cramp, food poisoning I've ever seen, like puking up green shit from the green Tums he ate or whatever, just puking on this public sidewalk. Like, it's like, but then we finally got to the beach and that was great. Great seafood. And then rode back and then went home. And that was another great trip. I did also, I didn't talk about my first couple days there without
because
them.
you went there before everyone, right?
Yeah.
You should. You went there before everyone and decided that, all right, you're going to do something epic before everyone gets there. And so, yeah, go into that. I think that's a pretty cool story.
Yeah. Being the third trip, I had seen volcanoes from afar, seen them smoking or whatever. No, like active ones, which you can get to active ones and like get not on them, but like adjacent to them. So you can see like lava coming out at night. Like I've seen videos. It's like incredible. But I hadn't done that in the first two trips. So the third trip, I had found a volcano to hike up to the top of. And so I flew in to Nicaragua a couple days before the other guys. And I had, at this point, I had like a third party map that I could take some like a breadcrumb trail that somebody had posted on the internet for like how to do this hike up to this top of this volcano and then overlay it on like an offline map. And so like I felt pretty comfortable with that. And I was telling people like, yeah, I'm going to fly in and day one, I'm gonna go hike a volcano. So I flew in late some Thursday night or something, woke up Friday morning, got out to the small city that was near where this hike was going to be, and then took a chicken bus and like, I don't know, had lunch, got my shit together, took a chicken bus and like got off on just some random stop that was basically where this trailhead started. And it was a 6-mile hike and 3,000 feet vertical. and I figured it would take me like 3 hours, I think. Before I started the hike, I went to uh, I went to a tour group in the city that did a sunset hike. And I was like, hey, I'm going to hike this today. They drive up the backside, hike kind of up around the top, very short because they're already at the summit basically. They hike around at sunset and then they drive back down. And I was like, I'm going to hike from like where the real one starts 6 miles down at like off the volcano, but can I get a ride back with you guys? Uh, at I'll be up there. Can I just get a ride back with your group on that sunset? And they were like, yeah, sure. But like, if you're not there, we can't sit around. Like, we're not going to have a way to get a hold of you. I was like, yeah, I totally get it. And they gave me a phone number just in case, their tour guide's phone number or something. And like, I never used a phone on those trips, like an actual cell, hard, like phone call. And so I wasn't really relying on it. And so I figured they were like, yeah, we're going to be coming back around 6:30 or 7, I think is what they said. And I was like, all right, so as long as I start the hike by like 3:30, be a 3-hour hike, which I don't even know. I don't know if I could do a 6-mile, 3,000 elevation hike now, but whatever benchmark I was using for my hiking ability, I figured it would take 3 hours. And I was like, so I need to get started by I wanted to get started by 3 or something. To have plenty of time. Anyways, by the time I got out there, I started like 3:30. And so I'm like, okay, 3 hours exactly. Like this will work. And the first like 2 hours of the hike or first hour and a half was the first 1,000 feet vertical was kind of just slow and steady. I was walking up a dry riverbed past one volcano, and it was like 100 degrees out that day. So it was really hot, but I had, I think, 5 or 6 liters of water, and I had like 2,000 calories in Cliff Bars. So it's like, I had sustenance. But it was beautiful. Past some like caballeros, and like it was really cool. But then it's like 4:45, 5 o'clock or something, and I'm taking videos and pictures as I'm going along, and I can kind of see this little peak way off there, and I'm looking at the map and I'm looking at my pictures, and like zooming in. I'm like, oh, God, that seems so far away to be where I need to be at the top of in an hour and a half. Like that seems so far away, but maybe, it must not be it or whatever. And as I get closer, it becomes like obvious, like, yeah, that's it. And around 4:45 or 5 o'clock, I have I have 2,000 feet in elevation to climb, but I think only like 1 mile. It was something like the last mile was 1,500 or 2,000 feet elevation. So I'm like, all right, let's go. And so I'm just hoofing along after like hiking 5 miles in 100-degree, heat. And it was, I took some really funny Snapchats. I was like kind of narrating it as I was going, like getting dark, and I would put the timestamp in my Snapchat, like every time it's getting darker. And then I was like, can you guys Google dangerous nocturnal animals in Nicaragua? Like, no reason. Yeah. Like, and so I finally get up to the top. I'm just exhausted. And the top is this like kind of this big plateaued area, and then this big huge caldera of this volcano like off in the distance. It wasn't just like just a cone where you're walking up, like you're kind of like within some mountains. And so I finally get up there enough that I can see the caldera, and then I see these little lights that are kind of like going downhill somewhere, and it's got to be like 300 yards away still. And I'm just like so beat. And I think it was maybe 6:20. I wasn't even like, I hoofed it, and I wasn't even super late. Maybe it's 6:30 or 6:40 or something, but it certainly wasn't past 7. And they said they'd be up there till like 6:30 or 7, but I can see their little headlamps like walking away. I'm like, holy fuck, like they're done. They're already coming down back to their car probably. And so I go that direction. I'm thinking like, do I yell? Like, do I make a big scene? Like, how serious is this? Because if I miss my ride, like I'm sleeping up here. And I had brought jeans and a soft shell jacket, and it doesn't get that cold overnight, so I knew it wasn't going to be that cold, but I was prepared to, like, if I had to sleep out there, but it wasn't really the plan. And I was like, I'm not going to yell. Like, I don't know. It just felt like I was accepting my fate, but I was like, I'll try to call. I'll try to call. And so I like tried to get my phone cell turned on, try to call this number, like did not go through. So after like 10 minutes of that, I was like, okay, I'm sleeping up here. And so then I took my time. I went to the caldera, to the rim, and like it was really big and just kind of slowly smoking. It wasn't this like active, red lava volcano. But if you looked down, you could see red glowing kind of through the sulfur and haze. And that volcano like sat and just smoldered a lot. So a lot of times you couldn't see anything directly. And that was the experience I had. You could just kind of see some red, but it was still like a trip. And there is this tiny little chain link fence, or like, like poles with like a chain kind of going between them around this caldera. I mean, it was so not
You
not
probably
as
felt real
sophisticated.
safe there.
Yeah, yeah. But this area up there was huge. It was just this kind of like amongst the mountains and like this huge
Mhm.
plateau. So it's not like I had to precariously sleep balanced on the caldera, on the rim's edge or something. But I did, like, I was, checking it out, being like, I'm here. I gotta stick my head over and like kind of look down in there. So I did that. And as I was up there and like coming to terms with my fate, uh I had seen a campfire off in the distance, and I knew, because looking at the like tour groups, I knew that there were groups that would go up and camp overnight. So I'm like, all right, there's somebody else here. I'm sure it's a tour group, and um I'll, at least I don't know, I can go hang out with some people. So I kind of start walking towards it. They're like flashing a light at me because I think they could tell or see my headlight. Like, all right, this some fucking idiot is totally lost up here, and it's totally dark now, right? Because like, 6 to 7 p.m. is like getting very, very dark, and by 7, it's nighttime in close to the equator. And so it's probably 7:30, because I sat there and just messed around at the rim for a while, because I had nothing but time at that point. But yeah, walked over to them. Really nice couple that was running this overnight tour. But I remember the guy just looking at me like, "What are you doing here?" And I had plenty of food and water, like I didn't need a real meal. I had Cliff Bars and whatever, but they were super nice. Like, insisted that I had some of their spaghetti, and so they, the guy and his girlfriend that were the tour guides, they also insisted that I take a sleeping bag. And so I slept under this like dilapidated hut, this like straw hut that was kind of half fallen over. And I mean, like, it wasn't, the weather was super temperate, and so it wasn't really like, I didn't really need shelter, or anything. But I just plopped under there in a sleeping bag, just to have some type of spot to sleep in. And I remember waking up middle of the night, and I kind of like looked behind me, and there was like a pretty full moon next to the smoking caldera, and just in this like just crazy picturesque framing of like a million stars, this volcano 200 yards away smoking, and then a full moon. And I just remember thinking like, all right, well, this is the best mistake I've ever made. This is like 3 in the morning or something. I just happened to wake up and look around, and like, and then I walked back with them in the morning. Um, and then and then my friends were supposed to get in that next morning, and I'm like, I hope they weren't like waiting for me to respond to a text. There was also like some civil unrest happening in Nicaragua like that weekend. And so I'm thinking like, I didn't have service. I got stuck on this volcano, and like, I hope they didn't bail, thinking like, oh my God, we haven't heard from Chapin. Like, we're not going to go. Finally, by the time I got service, they were both like on their way or on their layovers. I'm like, all right, guys, like, get in here. Let's get on our bikes, and we're gone. Like, we got to go.
That's so cool. I sense like a common theme throughout this. I feel like you got your comfort in Guatemala, and then you just kind of understood Central America enough that you could just totally wing this entire thing. And I mean, probably a little bit foolish from time to time, but I think that that's like very commendable, in how you get these cool experiences that no one ever is going to get, because they try to plan everything to the dot, to the T. You like, how do you compare Central America to the rest of the world that you've seen? Because I know that going to Costa Rica, it was just like massive rainforests, different cultures, climates. At points we're riding up the mountains through like green pastures. It looked like just farmlands, and then you're in the rainforest. And I've also heard that like El Salvador, there's no rainforest at all, because it's at just like a much lower altitude. So was Guatemala and Nicaragua both very similar to Costa Rica?
Um, yeah.
I mean, through all
I
your trips, you're talking about
think,
volcanoes, rain, and so I assume that it's very
yeah,
similar to each of them with their own
I
unique
think
spins.
so. Like the Samuk Champey area in Guatemala, I'm trying to think if that was like the most lush and like rainforest like. Because even in Costa Rica, the cloud forest was like, I mean, that was really foresty too. But I think Samuk Champey was lower than like the cloud forest. And so it was just that much more humid and less, less getting to the arid direction or something.
Okay.
But those are similar. And then Nicaragua, like Ometepe in the volcano islands, these two volcanoes that were close enough to kind of be, connected by land, whatever. In the middle of this lake, like nowhere else had that. Um, Guatemala may have been the most diverse, or at least where we were, and that was like incredible. So, but yeah, I think they were all fairly similar. Like that's interesting. I didn't know that about El Salvador. That's what do you say? It's low enough or flat enough. There's no rainforest.
One of my coworkers just went out there and they were expecting Costa Rica. They were expecting rainforests everywhere, and it just wasn't that at all. And I think El Salvador is on the southern end of Central America. So I think a lot of the mountainous range kind of peters off as you get to that southern area.
Yeah. Also, what was interesting is like the rainforests there are not like movies of an Amazon rainforest. I wouldn't say it's not that
Dense.
yeah, dense or stereotypical or wet or something like that. So that wasn't exactly like what I pictured. And yeah, it's interesting compared to other parts of the world. I haven't been to that many parts of the world. So I went to Australia when I was like 7 with my mom on a business trip. So I was like very young, only remember a little bit. Remember the people being super nice, but like I don't really have much to compare there. And then I've been to Mexico a bunch of times, partially because of the Central America. Like I'd gone twice in high school. One was for my high school graduation with my friends, just so we could like go party somewhere at 18. Um, but then after Central America, it was like, oh, actually, our mutual friend Joey, actually who did the podcast, right? He did the
First
yeah,
episode.
the what?
First
Oh,
episode.
yeah. So I've gone to Mexico with him on like a surf trip and in Mexico City, and like those are just so easy now. So like basically anywhere I'm pretty comfortable in Latin America,
Okay.
enough, and like it's really cool because it does just feel there's just not that much planning. I feel like I have to do ahead of time because I just kind of have the lived experience where I just kind of know what to expect, so I don't really have to like prescribe everything out. But so I've been in, I think I counted, I've been to Mexico and Central America 9 times between the two now.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
which I guess means I've been to Mexico 6 times. Um, but yeah, it's great. I've been to Canada and Toronto, a little bit, and then nothing more exotic than that. And then around the U.S., I've lived around the U.S. a lot because I grew up in California and then went to school and worked in the Midwest and various states and stuff around there. And then I've never been to Europe, so I'm not that worldly to have experience to compare. Um, I just really love Latin America. And also I don't know if I'm saying that incorrectly. I don't know if Latin America technically includes Central America and Mexico, but I just mean like Spanish speaking countries.
Yeah. And they're so like approachable. It's enough of a culture shock, but it's more or less the same time zone. You're not hopping on a flight to get across the ocean.
Yeah.
I still think Costa Rica was one of the favorite trips of mine. I'm like itching to go back over Europe, and I know Europe has so much different everything to see.
Yeah.
So,
Well, you can certainly like pull it off easier, I would imagine, than a Europe trip. Because you can just be like, okay, if we're not going to do a Europe trip for any of the, 100 reasons that we come up with to not do stuff in life like year after year, if you can't do the Europe trip, you might be able to be like, okay, but instead, should we go back to Central America this year? Because it is just it's so reasonable to pull off.
yeah.
It's not expensive. And yeah, you're not going to get jet lagged going either direction. And yeah, but so but I think that reason is why I haven't gone back to Central America. Also, like that was 2018 that I did Nicaragua. 2019 I moved to Venice Beach. That was new and fresh, and I started surfing and doing stuff down in Southern California, camping a lot. That was 2019, and then COVID happened in 2020. And in LA, COVID lasted 3 fucking years, it seemed like. And so there wasn't going to be any international travel probably for, 2020 and 21. And then anyways, and as I've thought about like, okay, what's the next, like, not even just a big trip, but just some adventure, right? Something that's like those trips that's not just going to Mexico City, where like Mexico City, we went for Dia de los Muertos and it was like incredible. I highly recommend it. Talk about approachable and easy. Like if you've never been to Mexico or Central America, like you can go to Mexico City and like it's pretty easy. There's Uber, you don't have to speak a lot of English. You don't have to, that was crazy. But so doing a trip that's something different, right? That pushes my boundaries and comfort and like something that I haven't done multiple times now, I think is why I haven't just put another Central America trip on the books, because I've done it and I need to go to Europe. I need to go to Europe. And even like Canada and Alaska are high up on my list. And I actually when I was nomading last year, I was working on Alaska was going to be the next spot. And then I was working for Amazon and they like called us back into the office. And so that put a kibosh on my nomading. But yeah, I'd like to go to Europe.
If you end up going to Alaska, we went for a wedding and feel like we got to see quite a bit. So I could give you some pointers. I don't even know how to approach that state until I went there. And now I feel like I know at least enough about it to get you started. But yeah, I mean, is there anything else? We're going on over an hour now. So is there anything else you want to, draw on or come back to or reflect on before we close this up?
No, I think we hit all my good stories from that trip. Yeah, I remember when they were fresh, I remember thinking like something is going to sound really vain, but like something along the lines of like, that is like, I am so fucking cool and like appreciative to be able to do those trips and then multiple of them. And it's crossed my mind as I've gotten older, because the last one 2018, and oh my god, we're in 24, so 6 years ago was the last one I did. So I think about that as like, and I carry it with me as like, I could do that again. Like I've done it before. I could do more of that, and it's just cool. I'm very thankful to like have those and have them go well enough that I didn't have like a terrible story to scare me from doing that. That like kind of it's good inspiration to like just keep doing stuff like that. And I think I feel like maybe the older you get, the more you have to lose. So I would take less risks, but it still means it doesn't mean I can't do the trips, at all, or like in some form and stuff. So I've been thinking about that lately, and like, yeah, gotta get another one going. But maybe like riding motorcycles through the UK.
That'd be cool. I would love to get out to the UK. I had one of Chelsea's cousins on, and she talked very highly of it, and it just sounds unreal. No, that's great. It's funny having all these different guests on and hearing the level of like risk versus, planning that everybody has, and for the most part they all go very well, but it's really interesting to start to draw parallels between the different guests and the different locations. Yeah, I really appreciate you coming on. Is there any like shout outs or where people can find you, any links or anything you want to share before we close up?
That's a good question. I got an Instagram like 6 months ago, so I'm nowhere. You find me on LinkedIn. But yeah, thanks for having me on. That's really fun. What do you say?
Look them up, ladies.
Yeah. Yeah. I use LinkedIn exclusively for dating, so if that's what you're looking for, that's where you'll find me. Thanks for having me on. It's really fun to relive those.
Absolutely. All right, we'll talk later. Thank you for listening to the High Quality Fun podcast. If you guys enjoyed this show, please give us a follow. And if you have a good story or just want to say hi, feel free to reach out to us on Instagram or YouTube. Thanks for listening.